We are live.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we are in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Inuit, Cree, and Dakota peoples, and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. My name is Cynthia Stevens, and I'll be chairing the hearing this morning. Joining me this morning from the Board of Revision are Mr. Ian Mahone and Mr. Brent McIntyre. Our assessor is Mr. Justin Mikulik, and our secretary this morning is Mr. Jason Robertson. We'll be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the Board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the Board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We'll then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all of the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the Board will deliberate in private to make its decisions. You will receive the Board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. This morning, we will be hearing items 2 through 8 on our docket. And Mr. Robertson, please swear in the assessor and the applicants.
Certainly. Mr. McLeod?
Hello. Pardon me?
Please state your full name.
Oh, Justin Mikulik.
Do you affirm that the evidence you are about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. I see another assessor with you. Will he be presenting as well?
Yeah, probably.
Okay. Please state your full name.
Matthew Stephen Barocas.
Do you affirm that the evidence you are about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. And an applicant. Please. Do you affirm that the evidence you are about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. You may be seated. Mr. Applicant, do you affirm, please state your full name.
Justin Zarnowski.
Do you affirm that the evidence you are about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Did I ask you to state your full name? I don't think you did. My apologies. Please state your full name. Do you affirm that the evidence you are about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. So the first item we're going to hear this morning is 914 Grosvenor Avenue. So Mr. Mikulik, please proceed when you're ready.
Okay. File number 22-677, roll number 120-230-13000. Roll year 2023. Assessed value $1,551,000. Classification 20, resident and liabilities taxable. So we have one building, 3 stories, effective year built, actual year built 1913, with 15 suites and 10 outdoor parking. You could see on page 2 the location on Grosvenor, which is just east of Stafford Avenue, between Dorchester. And I had made a recommendation on the property to reduce the value to $1,446,000, based on the net operating income of $74,472 and a cap rate of 5.15%.
Sorry, can you repeat those numbers again, please?
Yeah, so to reduce the assessment to 1,446,000, and then with a net operating income of 74,472, and a
And
capitalized,
5 5.15.
yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Ms. Schillerman, are you in agreement with this recommendation?
No, we're not.
No. Okay, then please proceed, Mr. Mikulik.
Okay. So scrolling through to page 4, we have our income value summary. So our average monthly rent per unit with the model was coming in at $938.61. You could see the model workup with a gross potential rent of $168,950. Vacancy 4.2% and expense rate of 50.66%, gave a net operating income of 79,859. And I'll be touching on that as we go down. You'll see my workup with the new figures. But to page 5, so I did provide rent comps with similar properties in the area. So you could see where the average monthly rent per unit falls in line with other properties. Capitalization rate. So this just gives here the city of Winnipeg multifamily model capitalization rates. They range from 4.8 to 5.6% for the 20th and 80th percentiles. And then further on to page 7, we have our cap rate sales that were used as evidence to support the model. So you could see we provided 6 sales here, and they range from 4.77% to 5.74%. And to page 8 and 9, I had just provided just an overview of trends here for multifamily apartments. So capitalization rates nationally from 2017 to 2020 were in the range of 4.5% to 4.3%, as you could see in the chart below on the bottom of page 8. And then further on page 9, where Winnipeg fell in 2017, we were around the 4.5% in 2017, so right around the average nationally for capitalization rates. So as we move on, page 11, you'll see my workup here, with the main thing being stabilizing the repair and maintenance for the subject was quite high. So we ended up stabilizing at $2,927 per unit, which is still really quite high on the high end of the spectrum for multifamily apartments. And then which is what led me to our recommendation of 1.446 million. And then I had provided on page 12, 13 and 14 just the income and expense mailers from the subject, where you could see the line items of repair and maintenance are quite high. So 2020 being 51,880, 2019 being 105,642, and 2018 being 41,656. So that would conclude my presentation today.
Thank you very much. Ms. Schindlerman, any questions?
Yes, some questions. Page 1, I just want to confirm the actual year built is 1913, and you also indicated the effective year built is 1913.
That's correct.
So that would make this building about how old? 100 and how old?
108, 109.
You're indicating that there's 10 outdoor parking stalls. Have you seen the lot and the building on the lot?
No, I haven't.
So if I said those 10 parking stalls didn't exist on this lot, you couldn't confirm that.
Sorry, can you repeat that again?
Sorry, if I said that those 10 parking stalls do not exist on this lot or roll number, you couldn't confirm that?
I mean, do you want me to double check?
We'll put it this way, if it didn't have those 10 stalls, would that impact your valuation?
I'm not sure.
Okay. On page 5, you have your comparable rents. Given the situation in Manitoba is a rent control situation, if the subject building has certain rents and is under rent controls, would the landlord be able to charge more than what is allowed by the rent controls?
Sorry, so just to reaffirm, you asked if the landlord can charge more than what's allowable by the rent controls?
Correct.
No, they can't.
Okay, so if the rents in place on the subject are what the rents are, then the landlord is allowed only the 1.1% or whatever the guideline is in a particular year.
Well, they can apply for an increase beyond the rent control if they did right towards the rental tenancies branch on improvements that have been made for the property.
If improvements were made though, and that would be significant improvements.
I lived in an apartment for 5 to 10 years, and every year we got over and above rent increases, and there were no renovations done. So it's really a subjective thing, I guess you could say.
But if you were a buyer of this property and you knew that the law was that you can't raise the rent without spending money, you'd be valuing it based on the rent in place and not a hypothetical rent that someone else charges.
Yep. Yep, correct.
On page 6, the City of Winnipeg capitalization rates for the 2023 general parameters for 20 to 80 you show here is 4.8 to 5.6. Do you know what the full range for multi-residential was? Not just the 20 to 80?
Yeah, it would be around 3.6 to I think 7.3 in that ballpark. This is just the the meat of the distribution, 20th and 80th percentile.
Right. So this would cover all the 4.8 to the 5.6 would cover all buildings multi-residential in Winnipeg.
No, it's between the 20th and 80th percentile. There's some that have caps higher than 5.6, and there are some that have caps lower than 4.8.
So there would be some that would fall out of this range for various reasons, like maybe being 110 years old.
Not specifically, no. I mean, the area comes into play as well. Height, age, of course, condition. There's a lot of elements, not just how old the property is.
Right. On page 7, the comparable property or the comparable cap rate sales. Did you have a chance to look at any of these properties?
You mean financially or like a walkthrough?
Visually, look at them, see what type of properties they were.
Yeah, I mean, I'm here because I did this list. I did the cap rate analysis. I went through a whole list of properties, probably hundreds, and was able to come up with these because they had normal income and expenses leading up to the 3 years prior to the year of their sale. And then I stabilized their income and expenses, and using their sale price, I was able to come up with a cap rate. So I checked for things like whether the sale was associated or not, whether it was an estate sale. There were sales that had originally been on this list, but then were removed when more due diligence was done. So a lot of care was taken into coming up with this list. I haven't walked through them though, but I would have seen, I've seen pictures of them and I'm familiar with them.
So 2390 McPhillips, you would think would be comparable to the subject at 19,000,004 and built in 2015.
Well, these properties, they're not meant to be site specific. This is an add-on that we have in all of our briefs, not specifically to 914 Grosvenor. It's just to substantiate the range of cap rates that the model is kicking out and showing that the actual sales are in parallel with what the model is doing. So if it was a new build, like one of the new builds, you'd see that the new builds in our model are coming in under 5%, and McPhillips sold at 4.8.
Are you not looking for a cap rate that would be applicable to the subject property in this case, if that's what you're valuing?
Well, I mean, there's not, well, there's a lot of sales. Not all of them are usable. Most actually aren't. You have to be really careful when looking through them. I know other organizations have come in with less cap rate sales actually. So again, we're not changing the cap rate. The cap rate's modeled. The model 20 to 80th is supported by this range of sales. So this is just to show that the model's working.
Okay, the model is working, but is it working to value the subject?
Yes, that's our contention.
So you put in 555 Gordon here, 575 or 574 cap. Down pretty similar location, newer than our property, you know, reasonable, similar amount of suites. What's the model putting in an extra 60 basis points of cap rate difference between Gordon? Like, how is Gordon, you know, a 574 cap? And you're saying these are comparables for our property. I mean, this is your brief, but our property is 5.15. But what's the difference? What's, you know, that's a huge difference in cap rate.
Okay, so I'm not saying that these sales are comparable to your property. I'm saying that these are an example to substantiate the meat of the distribution of the model. In regards to 555 Gordon, I did a 3-year stabilization, and that's with the sale price, what it came out to. Now, the model, we're not modelers, so I can't actually say with any certainty why it came out to 5.15, but that's a valid question.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think that it's their comparable. It's the closest. I don't know. You have to, but we can talk about that in our actions.
Page 8 and page 9, I just want to ask you again, once again, these ranges or these charts you're showing, they would include all apartments in Winnipeg, all like the brand new ones, all the ones just built 3 years ago. You know, might include some built in 1913, but probably not as many as newer ones. I mean, as you, even in your comps, you have very few that are much older than 1965 or 75. So these cap rates that you're showing are 4.5 and 4.3. That's all the buildings in Winnipeg.
Correct. Correct.
So in your workup on page 11, you had said that, at least in your opinion, the repairs and maintenance here were high for an apartment. Do you mean generally, you know, for just all apartments that you look at, $3,000 a unit seems high, or do you mean it's high for a 109-year-old apartment?
I think $3,000 a unit is high for any apartment. It's on the very far end of the spectrum for repair and maintenance.
But when you say that, you mean looking at writ large, all apartments in Winnipeg, it's on the high end of the spectrum.
Yes.
Okay, no further questions. Thank you. Thanks, Justin.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mahone, do you have any questions for the assessors?
No, I don't, thank you.
Mr. McIntyre?
I just have one. If you go to page 8, Justin.
Yeah.
You've included post-reference information in your brief.
Because of
Order
I
to
went up to 2020, so when I had it highlighted in bold, I have 2017 4.5% and 2020 4.3% to highlight that you wouldn't include 2021.
So this 3.48, take the last graph.
That's on bonds. That's on it, like, so it's just comparing different rates throughout Canada based on different types of properties, and then comparing them to the Bank of Canada 10-year benchmark bond.
Still post-reference, isn't it?
The end of the chart is, yeah, but I highlighted the 2020 in here to specifically state that we weren't including the 4.21%.
But the same thing happens to your overall cap rate chart.
Where's that?
That's just above the bond yield chart.
Yeah, so it just gives a picture of the trend of where cap rates are going. I wanted to highlight where the trend of cap rates were going in multifamily.
Beyond the reference date.
I guess it's, if you want to read it that way, then sure.
Okay, that was my only question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. My questions have all been answered, but I will just clarify that we will not be taking any post-reference information in the on the brief into consideration when we are doing our deliberations. So, Ms. Schindelman, please proceed with your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, page 1 of my brief. The subject is a 15-unit walk-up apartment built in 1913. 3 of the units are below grade, and the property is not handicap accessible. Maintenance of a 109-year-old building is significant because of its age and original systems. When we took over management in 2018, there was a significant amount of deferred maintenance. In 2020, the value was set at $949,000, and the 2023 assessment showed an increase of 63% to $1,551,000. With the recommendation, I'm sure it's a little bit less than 63, but it's still significant. Rental income is based on actual for my workup, $176,763. Vacancy is used at the model rate in this particular case. I'm sorry, that's actual vacancy for the year, and then the total operating costs are actual, leaving a net operating income of $52,985. Capitalization rate of 6% would fall within the general parameters of 3.6 to 7.3 at 6%. It would be on the slightly higher range, but it is for a 109-year-old building that has not had any major renovation in its time. The market value is $883,083. The rent roll is shown below. The 2 bottom units, 16 and 17, are basement suites. Page 3 shows the CMHC market rents. It shows that our rents are still below, are below average, but they are what they are. We can't get more than what we can get. The expense ratio in this valuation is 69.93, and it's actual for the year. History of expenses with a building that is this age. It has fire escapes and old mechanical systems causing just repairs and maintenance to be very high, causes utilities to be high because the systems are not efficient. And this is again the actual for the year. Page 4. As I mentioned before, the capitalization rates in the 2023 general parameters for residential are 3.85 to 7.4. That's what I read in the manual. And we have used 6%. And this would be in a market range for this particular property. I was able to find one comp. I obviously don't have access to sales like the assessment department does, but I found this comp, which is 469 Kennedy, built in 1910, about the same year, 27 units, a few more, and it sold for $1.5 million in 2018. That's a value per unit of $55,555, and that was based on a capitalization rate of 6.33. The subject valuation has a value that's not sale price, that should set value per unit of $58,872 under this valuation using a 6% cap rate. The sale price is slightly lower than the valuation for the subject. However, the two properties are similar in age with no balconies. The property that was sold actually shows brand new windows and it's in better condition than the subject, but in general, these two properties are comparable. Part of the reason that the expenses are higher, the deficiencies in this building, because it hasn't had a major renovation. So the current boiler system doesn't allow for individual in-suite temperature control, and there's no air conditioning. So tenants put in their own window units and when in the winter it's too hot in the suites, they open their windows to cool it down. And there's a cost of heat loss and heating and cooling systems inefficiencies are borne by the landlord. None of the suites have been fully renovated. Many have trip hazards from floors lifting and shifting. Plumbing fixtures consume a lot of water due to their age. Toilets are not low flow and they may not be able to be installed due to the size of the original drain lines that are still in use, which is one of the reasons why a major renovation hasn't been done yet. It's because there are so many things to deal with. It's not just a cosmetic, paint or change out a plumbing fixture. It usually leads to a more significant maintenance requirement in the end. We submit that the value of this property is $883,000. And on page 6 are some photographs of the actual condition of the property. Page 6 and page 7. You can see it's all original flooring. You can see original plumbing, original doors, all original tiles. You can see that's that like pink color, if you remember. Plumbing fixtures, it's all original. Cabinets. You can see on page 9, page 10, page 11. You can see that it's all original. The other reason that a renovation has not been done is because of the extent of the work to be done. A unit would have to be vacant. We couldn't renovate while somebody was living there. So that's something that will be undertaken in the future as suites go vacant, but it's just haven't been done yet. Page 15 and 16 show the income statement for the property. I need to clarify something about the parking. There is no parking on site. This roll number in this lot has no parking. So the landlord uses parking from an adjacent building and pays for the maintenance of the parking at that adjacent building, and that's where the parking comes for this property. There is no parking on site. That becomes a problem for leasing as well. We have 15 units and we only have access to about 10 stalls. So that becomes a problem for leasing as well for us.
Yeah, and then so really what we're asking for is two things. One, that the net operating income is based on actual. It's like we're not in the business of making less money on rental income or spending more on operating costs. Like we're doing the best we can. And then on cap rates, our view is, you know, this isn't a good asset. It needs a lot of work, requires a ton of management. And so it should be, you know, a 6% cap. This isn't something where, you know, if you were buying it, you're buying a job and an asset, and that gets factored in when people buy these things. It's not a new apartment building, not a ton of develops. It's a job that you're buying. And so when you do that, that's a higher cap rate. It's more risk, more work. And so that should be taken into account on the valuation.
That's everything.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Mikulik, do you have any questions?
Yeah, regarding the sale comparable at 469 Kennedy Street, would you say that this location is inferior or superior to the property on Grosvenor?
It's a different location. I would suggest, I don't know that I can suggest.
I think it's a little bit worse, and that's why the cap rate's a little bit higher.
And did you consult any market reports in coming up with your cap rate?
I looked at the Johnson report to find, and like you said, you also said was that there was very few, or your colleague, I'm sorry, said there were few sales to look through that were similar to the subject, and I agree with that.
And so just scrolling to like your pictures on page 6, 7 and onwards, like how long ago were those photos taken?
Oh, these would have been taken, I believe these were taken in about 2018, but there's been nothing done since then. I can assure you that.
Okay, so over the past 3 years, though, you've spent almost 200,000 in repair and maintenance, and the building still looks like this?
We've done some things that you don't see, like the fire escape, I believe, was done. Let's see what was done. I have some other. There was a little bit of roof work done. So these are not things that lease the building or sell the building or improve the building for higher rents or lower cap rate. These are just necessities that have to be done. There was some HVAC work done, but not a new HVAC, it's just repairs. Like the repairs are huge.
And then regarding vacancy, would you say that the demand for this property is still pretty high, given the low vacancy?
There was low vacancy in 2020. There was higher vacancy in 2019. That's what I have close by. We don't have a huge vacancy problem right now, but we also.
I mean, your vacancy is higher than ours, so if we'll take yours if we're arguing about it. You had 7,000, we have 583.
Okay, that's all my questions.
Thank you, Mr. McIntyre. Do you have any questions?
I have no questions, thank you.
Mr. Mahone, any questions?
Yes, just with respect to the comparable that you cited at 469 Kennedy Street, I'm looking at the picture and 469 Kennedy, that's Cumberland on the left side of the picture, the north side of the picture. Is that correct?
I'm not sure.
Okay. And behind Cumberland is Central Park. Is that ring a bell, or is that?
I mean, I know Central Park's right around there, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other question I have with respect to the comp is, do you know the the split or the number of 2 bedrooms or 1 bedrooms or bachelor suites in that makeup of the 27 suites?
I don't, I got this comp from the Johnson report and they don't provide all that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. You had mentioned that the 2020 assessment was $949,000. Are you aware whether that was appealed?
Yes, it was appealed, not at a hearing, it was at 15-1 in that year.
Okay, because yeah, because you're coming in at a lower value than 2020 for 2023 assessment year.
Right. It's a few more years older and it hasn't been renovated.
Okay. Okay, thank you. That's all my questions then. Mr. Mikulik, do you have any requirement for a summation on this?
Nope, we are good.
Okay. Ms. Schindelman, any requirement for summation?
We don't need to repeat ourselves.
Okay, well then, thank you very much, everybody, and you'll receive our decision shortly. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Justin.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. You too.
Hope you get some more people in person.
Madam Chairman, if we can just take a 2-minute recess while we bring the applicants, the next applicant.
Absolutely. Okay, fine, thanks. We will recess for 2 minutes. Okay, I'm going to call the meeting back to order. The next item on the docket this morning is 344 Bridge Lake Drive. And Mr. Robertson, can you please swear in Mr. Navarro?
Applicant, please state your full name. Marcelo Navarro. Do you affirm that the evidence you are about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Thank you. You may be seated.
Okay, thank you. So 344 Bridge Lake Drive, Mr. Mikulik, when you're ready.
Okay, so we have file number 221691 and roll number 0309298650. Roll year 2023, assessed value 45,797,000. Classification is 20 and liabilities T. We have 5 buildings with number of stories ranging from 1 to 4. Actual year built, it's 2019. Number of suites 208 and 266 outdoor parking. So scrolling to page 2, you can see here where it's located on Bridge Lake Drive, just south of Bison Drive and southwest of Kenniston Boulevard, so in the Bridgewater area. And as we scroll down to page 4, we have our income value summary for the model. So rents ended up working out to $15.43 per unit. We have our gross potential rent $3,851,328. Vacancy 4.2%. Our effective gross income $3,689,572. Expense ratio 41.04%, which gives us a net operating income of $2,175,372, and the capitalization rate of 4.75%. On to page 5, just pulling up some rental comparables here. So you could see where the average monthly rent per unit would fall in line with other similar properties in the area. And moving on to page 6, just our capitalization rate chart from the city of Winnipeg, just showing where The 20th to 80th percentile of our model ranges from 4.8% to 5.6% for multifamily. And further sales on page 7 to support our capitalization rate evidence, where these properties had income stabilizations done, and would support the range of the model between 3.6% to 5.74% throughout these 6 properties. And then scrolling on to page 8 and 9, I had just provided an overview on page 8 nationally of the trend for cap rates of where they're headed. So 2017, if you see the bottom chart on page 8 on the left, 2017 was around 4.5%, and then 2020 would be 4.3%. And then just showing on page 9 where 2017 was falling in around 4.5%, and you could see the trend line there of the multifamily apartments. Now we get to page 11. I just gave the income and expense workup because the property is fairly new, so we only had 1 year of data to go on. So you could see where I ended up coming up with $2,287,647 net operating income for the first year, and our model was coming in at $2,175,372. So from that end, we feel like we're below net operating income, so we feel pretty comfortable where the model's coming in at for that. And then just on page 12, 13, 14, I had just provided the subject's income and expense mailer on what I used to calculate my workup. So that would conclude the presentation.
Thank you very much. Mr. Navarro, any questions?
Yes. The first question is whether you've been in this location.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Have you inspected this property?
No, I haven't.
Matt, have you inspected this property?
No, I haven't.
Okay. And in terms of its location on page 5, this is the same general market region, but the only one that's in the neighborhood is, I believe, 140 Eaglewood. Is that correct?
I guess so, and it's the only one in Bridgewater.
Okay. And in terms of your cap rate information, just to make sure that I'm clear on this, what you're saying here is that 4.8 is your 20th percentile, meaning that only 20% is lower than 4.8 and 80% is higher than 4.8, correct?
Yes. Okay.
And again, for your 80th percentile, that is 5.6. 80% is lower than this and 20% is higher, correct?
Yes.
Do you know how large the sample was?
I don't have that information on hand. I wouldn't be able to answer that.
Okay. And of the buildings that are, because most of this docket is generally newer buildings, you'd agree, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So how many would you have reviewed as sample sales?
Well, when I was doing the cap rate sales found on page 7, the newest and the most applicable sale would be 2390 McPhillips. That probably be the best indication given suburban area, year built, and overall size.
Okay. And I know we'll likely get into rebuttal on this, but there was no workup for the 2390, was there?
I've done a full workup. It's just not in this brief right now. But I did 3 years stabilized on it. Sold between unrelated parties. Came out to about 479.
Now, in terms of your page 8, I'm aware of this report, and it is post-reference, isn't it? Is it not?
The end of it is, yes. The last, you should go up to Q2 2021 or Q1 2021. We'll trim off the end next time.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Mr. Navarro, just for clarification, we did discuss this previously, and the board will not include the post-reference information in our decision-making.
Okay. I did want to ask them one additional question about that chart, if I may.
Sir, go ahead.
Okay. Just because I am familiar with that report, it includes many of the largest centers across Canada. In fact, actually, I do not believe Winnipeg is in there. Were you aware of that?
Well, so on page 9, I had posted that in 2017, Winnipeg was at 4.5%. So it was to highlight that they're right around the national average.
Okay, and getting to page 9 and the real estate forum, that report stops at 2017, correct?
Yeah.
And you have no further information beyond that? The source?
No.
Okay. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hone, any questions?
I don't have any, thank you.
Mr. McIntyre, any questions?
I have no questions, thank you.
And I have no questions. So Mr. Navarro, please proceed with your presentation.
This is 344 Ridge Lake Drive. You can see the roll number there. This is in Bridgewater. I have inspected this property. The building age is 2019, 4 stories, wood frame construction. And on page 3 of the report, you can see the intended use of the report and the intended user. Don't believe I need to get into that. As I said, this is a 4-story apartment building located in Southwest Winnipeg, on the corner of Bison Drive and Kenniston Boulevard. This is again Bridgewater, and we have 208 residential units in 4 separate buildings. You can see the property location there on page 5 and the buildings. You can also see the amenities in the middle. And right where the parking is in the middle, you'll see a structure there. That is a tenant center. And next to it, you can see a swimming pool. The tenant center is equipped with, I guess, party rooms and a gym and mail lockers, so for special deliveries and things like that. It's also got a I guess a Wi-Fi hub in there where people can go and use the Wi-Fi from the tenant center. The highest and best use is believed to be the current use. And in terms of the analysis, we are looking at the April 1, 2021 reference date with the present physical condition of the property. In terms of burden of proof, the burden of proof is obviously on the assessor to prove that the assessment is correct. In terms of what we do in our process, we take a site-specific process rather than a modeled approach like the city uses. And in terms of the income approach on page 8 and the capitalization report, capitalization rate information on page 9, I'll quickly move to page 11. Just to go over the summarized values. So in this case, we have a fairly new structure. again, 2019. So really, we are only getting effectively 1 year of income and expenses. Going forward, obviously, we'll have access to more, but based on our reference date, any information beyond 2020 doesn't really help us. So we have the effective gross income at $3,564,359, and we have expenses of 33.99%. That gives us a net operating income of $2,352,876. To this, we've applied a capitalization rate of 5.25, giving us an indicated market value of $44,816,684, or $44,817,000 rounded. Now, in terms of repair and maintenance, in many of our briefs, you'll see the repair and maintenance study that we provide along with this property. As this property is fairly new, we've only really looked at 1 year, so it really would make sense at this point to include a repair and maintenance study at this point. You can look at the 2020 and get an idea of how the first year performance was. Unfortunately, that is only 1 year. So we don't know what's happening with this property going forward. And again, we've asked for a reduction to $44,817,000. I'll just quickly go back to page 8. Sorry, page 9. And we're not looking at the capitalization rate, we're looking at capitalization rate. And we've asked for a 5.25% cap rate. I'm sure you've all seen this at one point or another in the past, over the past few weeks. For buildings that are built 1999 and newer, we put a 5.25% cap rate on it. And the factors that we look at are things like the building type of construction, building amenities, age, supply and demand. Why would amenities add to risk? Well, you have to pay for them. You also have to repair them. So while you would get maybe a higher rent out of them, you're also going to have to repair them. So we feel that is an additional risk to the property. In terms of supply and demand, we've also noted in our cap rate study that there has been an oversaturation of new supply as of the reference date. And that is another reason why we put a 5.25% cap rate. Now, looking at the market reports of other brokerage firms, you can see that really the only one that differs from the others is the Cushman report. That basically says that there was a 25-point change in the cap rate. Now they're saying 4.75 to 4.50. We don't necessarily look at these rates simply because we don't know how they were calculated. We don't know what was included in the calculation of the sales and the capitalization rate calculations. So what we look at for the most part is the change in assessment versus the change in capitalization rate from one cycle to another. So from Q1 2018 to Q1 2021, Colliers is saying for low rise, these are not low rise, I believe. Are they low rise? What is the criteria for low rise, Matt?
I would say 5 or under. I think that's what you have on your chart as well. I think that's kind of the unspoken agreement that we got.
Yeah, exactly. So these are 4 stories, so I guess they would fit into that low rise figure. So from 2018 to 2021, Colliers is saying no change. CBRE for low rise A is saying a 0.25% reduction in the cap rate. CBRE B low rise, these are not Bs, these are As. Cushman low rise, again, no change. Colliers, those are high rise, so we don't need to look at that. So basically what we have is either 0 or 0.25% reduction in the cap rate. And where we were last cycle was 5.25. Now, at this point, I think I need to get into the capitalization report. If I can briefly go over that. I'm sure many of you have all.
Okay, can we just give everyone a minute to pull that up from our docket?
It'll be listed items 3 through 8, cap rate, Alta study.
Yeah, it's at the bottom of the.
Very bottom of the list, yeah.
Yeah. Has everybody got it?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, please proceed.
Okay, so on page 2, we can see that, again, this is the same chart that I just went over, so I don't need to go over that. On page 3, we have some of the financial information, which has also been, I think, included in the assessor's brief. In terms of suite mix, you can see that there's been a shift in preference from bachelor and one-bedroom suites to larger units, and this is displayed by Cmhc. So there you can see the trend from October 18 to October 2020. And on page 6, or sorry, at the bottom of page 5, you can see the capitalization table that we've included. And again, we've not changed our capitalization rate. So we've left it at 5.25, where it was at last cycle. On page 6, we have included some sales information for 4 sales. Those are all summarized in the end of the report, and there are income workups on it. We have also included the information where we could get in the appendix of the brief. So in terms of 2023 sale price per unit, Altus Group has looked at this in some detail as well. So what we found is that for 1999 plus properties, and we looked at 4, the average was 150,000 per door, and the median was 130 per door. Now, in terms of the way that we adjust capitalization rates, there are a few factors that we'll obviously look at. So we have our base rates set in here, and you'll see them there. And again, for our particular case, we're looking at 5.25 capitalization rate. But there are other circumstances where we also look at either adjustments, increases, or decreases in the capitalization rate. Now, building type and construction, heritage status, designation, building amenities, durability and quality of income, age, condition, parking, suite mix. You can see these lists. Those are additional reasons why we adjust the cap rate. Now, in page 8 at the beginning, you'll see a sample of cap rates. And these are basically just a look at the cap rates and how they've changed in terms of how we've settled these cap rates and their 2023 counterparts. So you can look at the age of the properties and go to, I guess the most relevant page would be page 10 of the report. So here we see properties that go from 1998 right up to 2021. And you can see that for the most part, the capitalization rates in 2020 were settled at 5.25. For 2023, they've gone to 4.75, 4.5, 4.75. Again, they vary. But we've maintained our cap rate at 5.25, not differing from the 2020s. And beyond that, you can see the multifamily market regions that the city is using. And you can also, if you recall in my questioning, you can see the market region that we are looking at, which is market region 11. And there are sub neighborhoods within that. And that is why I asked the assessor whether there was anything close by. The only property that was close by was the one property that I mentioned. And the rest of the information is market reports and our workups for the sales that we looked at. So I'm open for questions.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mikulik, any questions of Mr. Navarro?
So we have some rebuttal as well. Do you want to see the questions of the main brief?
Yeah, we'll go through the questions and then we'll do the rebuttal after all the questions have been asked. Thanks.
Okay.
So just in regards to the property itself, like you don't have any sales of newer properties to reflect the cap rate. All the sales are of older properties.
That's correct.
Is there ever a situation where you would adjust the cap rate down?
I haven't seen many. There is one in this docket where you can see a 5% cap rate. That is actually a mistake. It is supposed to be 5.25. There was no reason to adjust that cap rate, but I mean, conceivably, I guess there would be some situations where we could adjust the cap rate. For example, if you had an apartment building that underwent significant renovations, you would obviously look at adjusting the capitalization rate on a property like that.
You mentioned that some of the amenities like the clubhouse in the middle being a risk factor. Would that not also increase the, could be seen in the light of it in being a better demand for the property on the flip side?
Yeah, well, the way that I would look at it, and I'm not going to say that it's not going to cost more and they are going to get more income out of it. However, that is also going to push the rents up. So if you have an amenities rich building, you are going to be looking at higher rents, higher potential income if you can actually satisfy those rents with enough demand. But in general terms, what we also know is that these amenities are not typical and they really haven't been seen in Winnipeg. Now, I would say that you would agree that these are the first type of buildings like this that you probably encountered, correct?
Sorry, in regards to?
In terms of the type of amenities that are located at this location. There aren't many buildings like this that have these tenant centers with gyms and stuff like that, and plus the pools. Look, you're going to ask for a higher rent. That could become an issue, especially if your property, especially if market is somewhat saturated with newer buildings. But at the same time, you're going to be spending more money on expenses as these things mature. So while you're not going to see it maybe in the first or second year, down the road, these things are going to become more and more expensive as you maintain them.
Okay, just in regards to your comments in regards to saturation, currently the property is sitting at a 2.68 vacancy rate. The model is putting out 4.2. Is it not showing that there's better than market demand for this property?
I would say that there were incentives that probably made this favorable for people to get into this property, but I don't think we really know that going forward. And I think as a generalization, there is an oversaturation of the market. So we still have to see how this property will perform over the years. We're just getting 1 year of income and expenses at this point. It's not really giving us a good idea of where it's going to be down the road. Again, we're also making generalizations just like the model is. We feel that there is risk there in those amenities. And also in the price that those amenities will ask in the marketplace, because you are going to have to pay more rent to get into a building like this, and whether there is enough demand going forward.
Okay, just one more question on that point. It looks like it was built in 2019. 1 year later, they're already at below market vacancy. I don't know how that dovetails together with your comments in regards to saturation. Maybe that's not really a question, so I'll just move on to the cap rate study. So in regards to the cap rate study, if we could turn to that, please, on page 6, please. So we've got 4 sales. The newest effective year bill would be 1984. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then going back one page, you've got categories 99 plus. That's where the subject property would fall into, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So would it not make sense that even though you don't have any sales, that a property built in 2019 would have a lower cap rate, all else being the same as a property built, in the 80s?
As a trend, I don't think you can really look at the two in comparison. If you really wanted to look at it in some favorable way, you would have to look at newer buildings that have sold. You have one building that has sold, and unfortunately, that's part of the problem, is that it is just one. Now, for all intents and purposes, if you're looking at what the brokerage firms are saying, they're for the most part above 5, and we've been at 5.25 again because we didn't see that change in the market in terms of this type of property. So, getting back to your original point, comparing a 1986 sale to a brand new building, I don't see whether you're going to get anything fruitful out of that type of analysis.
Okay. Do you think that the drop in borrowing rates leading up to the reference date comparison to last cycle would have any downward pressure on capitalization rates?
Do I think so?
Yeah.
No. I would say that the borrowing rates are just one aspect of cap rates.
Okay. Those are the cap rate questions for now. We'll do rebuttal.
Okay. Any other questions, or is that it?
For us, no.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. McIntyre, any questions?
I have no questions, thank you.
Mr. Mahone, any questions?
I have a couple of questions with respect to the cap rates. I'm going to direct you to page 2 of your cap rate report, which is reproduced, and also at page 9 in your brief. Okay, taking at the 2021 Q1, there's a range of caps or cap rate range from a low of 4.5 to 6%, as I'm reading it. Am I reading that correctly?
Yes, if you take all of them combined.
Right.
Yes.
Now, is that the full range from the 2021 Q1, or is that one of the 80th percentile ranges that we hear the city uses?
No, that is the full range provided by these brokerage firms.
Okay. So as far as you're aware, there's no other outliers or anything else, either lower or higher?
No, and I will note that these brokerage firms tend to take the better quality builds when they put them into these reports. So
okay. And then I'm also looking at now page 3 of your cap rate study. That's the overall cap rates. So I'll just turn to that.
You're talking about page 5?
Sorry, let me scroll down here. No, page 3 of your cap rate study.
Okay.
The graphs.
Yeah.
That the first graph that appears, the overall capitalization rate trends from early 2000s to Q1 of 2021. That is the same graph that's reproduced in the city, you said, the city's materials?
I believe so.
Yes. Okay.
And of note, I don't think Winnipeg was even considered as a market in that study, so.
Okay, thank you. I have nothing further.
And I have no further questions either, and my questions have all been answered. So, Mr. Mikulik and Mr. Barocas, you said you had some rebuttal evidence you'd like to present?
Yeah, if you could pull up our rebuttal.
Okay.
There's a separate folder on the SharePoint, or there should be.
Okay, I'm just looking for it. There, no.
No? I put it in the wrong spot. Let me take a look here.
It was at the very.
I'm not seeing it.
That's weird because I am. Let's see here. Just refresh. Should be a folder labeled rebuttal.
Okay.
If you refresh your page, it's possible.
Okay.
So do you want to go through this? Or I can go through it.
Yeah, I just want to see it. Is that okay? That's fine.
I can email it to you as well.
I'm sorry, I did refresh and I'm not seeing it. My apologies.
Oh, I will email it to you.
Okay, thank you. I will pick it up right away.
I just sent that. Let me know if you receive it.
Okay, I have it. Thank you very much. Everybody else has got it now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So please proceed, Mr. Barocas and Mr. Mikulik.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so page one, this is just the title page. It's what we've done is we've restabilized a few of the sales here, looking at the income and expenses. Page two shows the summary. So of the 4 sales, the first one, Victor, is post reference. Was registered in land titles 2nd of June 2021. So that's a post reference sale. I would ask that you disregard it. Corden, we don't have any disagreement with. Very slight disagreement. Immaterial. Maryland, they're at 566. We're at 5.5, and Arden, they're at 536. We're at 5.02. I'll continue on and show you where we stabilize different. Page 3. This is the post reference sale. You can see essentially, I don't think Altus had the mailers when they were doing it, doing their stabilization. They only had the realtor pro forma to work off of, which you can see when comparing to the actual 3-year income and expense statements. They're not similar at all in terms of effective gross income estimation, repair and maintenance. Altus is at 14,000. They averaged about 23,000. There's a few other categories there. You can see the differences in hydro and insurance.
Okay, so this is the post reference sale you're discussing here?
And so I'm not going to go on
Okay.
for this longer because I know it is.
Maybe if you could explain it on one of the other properties.
Of course.
Yeah, because if we're not considering that, then no need to discuss it.
Just to make sure. Okay, so Corden, you can see that we actually don't really disagree. We use the most recent laundry income. They use the year prior. It's the same cap rate, doesn't matter. 677 Maryland, what had happened? This property, according to the Altus remarks, was renovated in 2013. Often after a renovation, what you'll see is there's a drop in repairs and maintenance over the short term, but then that ticks back up. Vendor and purchaser would recognize this under negotiation for a stabilized expense amount. What Altus did is they used the 4-year repair and maintenance, where I just use the most recent 2 years, which comes up to about 1,000 a unit. That's pretty normal R&M for a building, especially when that was renovated 7 years ago. I believe that's more appropriate than the Altus R&M, which I think was in the 700 or 800 amount. Slight difference. Everything else is the same. I've highlighted the differences. Then 32 Arden. This one is a little bit trickier to see. So basically what it is we didn't have any issue with the expenses. It was just the effective gross income, which I guess changed the 5% management stabilization. So Altus, I guess mistakenly double counted parking. If you go to page, what is this? Page 7, you can see what Altus did is they used the charge from the receivable summary by tenant rent roll on the bottom of page 7. And what they did is then they applied the parking amount, the yearly parking amount on the December 2018 rent roll and added it back in. The problem is you notice that I was able to tell they double counted because if you look at current month, it says 21,289, and that's inclusive of parking. So when you go to the receivable summary by tenant, you see the receipt column, 21,289. So clearly parking is included in the receivable summary by tenant. It shouldn't be added in again. So the difference is they had a higher effective gross income as a result for double counting parking. We just simply took what they reported year to date, 249, 371.95, and otherwise didn't have any disagreement in regards to expense stabilization. Came out to a 5.2 cap as opposed to a 5.36. And this is an 85 effective year built on a 69. So I mean, we're seeing cap rates. They can go down 5% for 89 effective year built. So it's not 85 effective year built. So below 5% for a brand new building is not unreasonable. That's our rebuttal on the Altus cap rate. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Navarro, any questions?
Would this have been the first time that this would have been issued, this rebuttal?
Pardon, can you say that one more time?
Is this the first time that you've released this type of rebuttal?
No, I've been doing this pretty much from the get-go.
Okay. Okay, thank you. We'll have to take a look at it.
Okay, that's your only questions. Thank you. Mr. Mahone, any questions?
No, thank you.
Mr. McIntyre, any questions?
I have no questions, thank you.
And I have no questions on the rebuttal either. So, Mr. Assessors, do you have any requirement for summation on this property?
No.
No.
Okay, Mr. Navarro?
No,
Nope. Okay, thank you very much. So that completes 344 Bridge Lake Drive.
Madam Chair, I was wondering if we could just have like a 5-minute break.
Okay, we can do that because it's 10:30, so that's fine. So we will recess for 5 minutes and return back at 10:35. Thank you.
And we're live.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll call the hearing back to order. The next item up on the docket this morning is 355 Bridge Lake Drive. So, Mr. McLick, when you're ready, please.
So we have file number 221693, roll number 030929862020, roll year 2023, assessed value 38,928,000, classification 20, liability is taxable. Number of buildings 4, number of stories range 2 to 4 stories. Actual year built, it's 2018 build, so fairly new. 176 suites and 218 parking stalls. Now you can scroll down here again, location very close to the previous property at 344. Just at the southwest of Keniston Boulevard and south of Bison Drive. And I'll take you to page 4 just so you could see our income workup. So you could see here our average monthly rent per unit from the model is $1541.29. Our modeled gross potential rent $3,255,204. Vacancy 4.2%, effective gross income 3,118,485. When we using an expense rate of 41.33%, and we get our net operating income for the model being 1,829,615, and a capitalization rate of 4.70%. I've provided, again, the rent comparables here. So just for you to take a look at, again, similar properties as the previous one, I believe they're the same. So we scroll on cap rate. We already touched on where our cap rates fall. Page 7, again, just our capitalization rate evidence that we provided to support the model. And then page 8 and 9, we had already touched on previously from the prior presentation. Now we'll go to page 11 and the income and expense workup that I had done for the property. So you could see here, I've stabilized coming in at a net operating income of 1,896,322,000. Whereas our assessment model is coming in at 1,829,615. So we're lower than the stabilized, and that's using, I just said I used 5% effective gross income for the management fee because theirs was under 5%. And I just again provided the statements used in the income calculation down to page 17. So that would conclude the presentation.
Thank you very much. Mr. Navarro, any questions?
I don't think so. I think this is basically the sister property of the other one, right?
Okay.
And, there's some slight variations in suite counts, but for the most part, they are almost exactly alike, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it would be the same capitalization rate information that we presented initially, same arguments, so.
Yeah.
I don't
Okay.
see questions. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. McIntyre, any questions?
Just one of curiosity, why is 344 Bridge Lake Drive cap rate 4.75 and the sister buildings 4.7?
You'd have to talk to an assessment modeler about that.
Doesn't it seem odd to you?
Sure. I mean, again, yeah, it's mass appraisal, so the model's gonna spit out variations from time to time, right? It's just part of the mass appraisal process.
But again, it's in the same neighborhood. I'm just curious as to why it would be different.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think Marcello mentioned that the suite breakdown was different overall, perhaps a different percentage. I'm just hypothesizing right now, but it's done by a formula and they're very close. I mean, 0.05 of a difference in cap. Kind of hard to make that distinction, but.
So does this property also have a tenant center?
Picture.
No, I can't answer that question. I don't know.
Okay, thank you. That was my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Mahone, any questions?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. My question was the same about the cap rate, so that's been asked and answered. So Mr. Navarro, please proceed with your presentation.
Okay, so we're looking at 355 Bridge Lake Drive. And as I mentioned, this is kind of the sister property of the other one. And it is basically across the street. So if you look at page 4, you'll see the red drop on there on the top picture. 344 is the property that we just looked at right across the street. So these two guys are next to each other and they both have the same amenities. They have the tenant center, they have the swimming pool. They are slightly different in terms of their, I guess, overall profile. As you can see, the other property had 4 buildings. This one only has 3. But they are built essentially in the same way, wood frame construction, similar age, similar amenities. From our perspective, there would be no difference in terms of the risk parameters, and the capitalization rate would likely be the same. So the highest and best use on page 5 is the continued use of the current use. Burden of proof again is on the assessor to prove that the assessment is right. We look at this from a site-specific perspective. And in terms of the capitalization rate, you can see that based on our capitalization rate chart for 99 plus properties, we are looking at 5.25. We've been consistent with this cap rate. On the bottom chart, again, you can see the brokerage firms and how they stratify their properties and how they've looked at the changes from 2018 to 2021. And for low rise, again, you're not seeing much of a change, if any at all. On page 10, you can see that our in terms of our net operating income, we're actually slightly higher than the assessor, both in terms of their stabilized approach and their modeled approach. So we feel we have an accurate representation of the income for this property. In terms of the issue, it is obviously the cap rate issue. How much, what type of premium to put on that property. We have noted again that 5.25 is our capitalization rate for 99 plus properties. So I don't think we need to get into it any further. We explained this in the previous property, and this property is really no different. So I'm open for questions.
Thank you. Mr. Mikulik, any questions?
No questions.
Thank you. Mr. McIntyre, any questions?
I have no questions, thank you.
And Mr. Mahone, any questions?
No questions for me, thanks.
And I have no questions, so that concludes this property. Thank you. So the next item on the docket is 25 Ancaster Gate. I believe that Mr. McClick, you have a recommendation here, but let's read this onto the roll number onto the record, and then you can walk us through that. Thank you.
So we're gonna do file number 222878, roll number 030915676600, and roll year 2023, assessed value 17,037,000. 2019 build, 69 suites, 81 outdoor parking, located similar area to the previous two properties that we discussed. This is just east of Kenniston Boulevard. And then the recommendation, I had made some errors in my calculation of the net operating income. So I would revise it to the net operating income that Altus had provided, which was 705,303. As you could see on page 11, I had only used the 1 year of 2020 and not the 2 years of 2019 and 2020. And then, so the new value would be 16,402,000 instead of what's currently on there right now at 15,300,000.
Okay, I'm sorry. So can you say that again? 16,402,000.
Yeah.
And so what's the NOI on that?
705,303.
705,303.
Yeah, and then the cap
Okay.
rate of 4.3%.
Okay, just
which is the
entering
model
this into-
cap.
That's the model cap. Okay,
That's
so
right.
all right. So your recommendation is 16,402,000 on an NOI of 705,303 and a cap of 4.3%. Mr. Navarro, are you in agreement with that?
I can't, Madam Chair. I haven't had a chance to discuss.
Okay. All right, thank you. So please proceed with your presentation then, Mr. McClick.
Yeah, no problem. So you can scroll to page 4, where you would find our income summary. So you could see there's 69 total units.
I just have a clarification question, Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
On page 2 of his brief, he has a different amount for the recommendation.
Yes, that's what he was just, I think he was to explain, Mr. McClick, that you had made an error there.
Yes. I had made an error in the calculation.
Yeah, do you maybe want to can you walk us through what occurred with that again, please?
Yeah, no, for sure. I had made an error in the calculation of the net operating income being 659,092. When upon further review, when I looked at it, if you look at page 11, I had only used the 1 year for recommendation workup, as it was my oversight that I didn't think the property had been fully occupied, like had been put on the roll for all of 2019, but indeed it was. So when I was looking at it, the Altus NOI workup that they presented would be a more accurate picture, which is why I'm going to use that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, please proceed.
Yeah, so back to page 4, where you could see just the suite breakdown, the total units, 69, average monthly rent, 17, 15, 75. Our gross potential rent, 1,420,641. 4.2% vacancy, effective gross income 1,360,974, expense ratio 46.17%, net operating income 732,612, and then the capitalization rate of 4.3%, which back to the net operating income we had revised it to the 705,303. For our recommendation. And again, I had provided the other comparable properties here, so you could see just to get an idea of other properties in the area. Same page 6 and 7, 8 and 9, the same capitalization rate information we provided based on the city of Winnipeg's ranges, and then the evidence to support the range of our cap rates on page 7. And then page 8 and 9 we have discussed already previously. Page 11, I had said that was my workup where I'd made the error about not including 2019. And then just the income statements down on page 12, 13, 14 that were used. So that would conclude the presentation.
Thank you. Mr. Navarro, any questions?
Yes. On page 5 of your report, again, the only comparable that is close to this property is Eaglewood Drive, number 4.
Yes.
Okay, and the subject average monthly rent per unit, is that a model or is that actual?
No, that's the assessment model.
Okay, and so none of your comparables are close to your subject in this case, correct?
No, I was not able to find other comps in the area that would reflect that, which is why we came up with the recommendation.
Okay, I'm speaking specifically about the rent though, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, so the next thing, obviously, and I think everybody's probably to notice this one, is the capitalization rate of 4.30. Can you give us an explanation of this one?
Okay, so last property it was 4.7. Looking at this property, they're in the same area. Really wondering why they don't have the same capitalization rate. The only notable difference that I can see is this property has only 1 building, whereas the other properties, I believe, had 3 or 4 buildings. I know applicants in the past have brought up, and it's certainly true for like townhouses, where you have the more buildings you have, the more roofs, the more HVAC, the more amenities. That's just looking at this property description inventory card. So perhaps that is a factor, but your question in regards to why aren't the capitalization rates closer is definitely valid, but unfortunately I have to once again say not involved in the modeling process, so that's about as best an answer as I can give you.
I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mahone, any questions?
No, that was my only question. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McIntyre?
No, Madam Chair, it's been asked and answered.
Yes, and that's the same for me. So Mr. Navarro, please proceed with your presentation.
Okay, we are looking at 25 Ancaster Gate, and you can see an overhead bird's eye view of this property. So in this case, not the same type of building. It's a single building as opposed to several buildings in a complex. It doesn't have It does have amenities, but it doesn't have the extent of amenities that the other two properties had. If you look at page 4, the general zone, you can see the general location of the property. It is quite close to the other properties, so that was our concern as to why the capitalization rate would have been different. The highest and best use is its current use, and I've gone over the burden of proof site-specific issues. In terms of the capitalization rate, you've seen this already, so we are looking at 5.25 in terms of the capitalization rate. And on page 10 of my report, you can see my workup. So we've looked at 2 years, we've stabilized them, and we've come to a net operating income of 705,303, to which we applied a 5.25 cap rate. And again, we haven't deviated on this cap rate issue. Again, we are saying that this type of property would have a very similar risk profile than the others. They are in this general vicinity. They are low rise, and they are, I believe, wood frame. So similar age. Again, I think they would carry a very similar risk profile. So that is why they have the 5.25 capitalization rate. I am just going to quickly confirm, this is actually wood frame construction, so I believe it is. And though I don't think I need to go into the rest of the report, I think we've already gone over that. It is essentially the same as my others, so I'm open for questions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mikulik, any questions?
No questions, thanks.
Okay, Mr. Mahone, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Mr. McIntyre?
I have no questions, thank you.
And I have no questions either. Thank you. So that concludes this property. So the next property on this morning's docket is 90 Paget Street.
Yes.
And Mr. Mikulik, when you're ready, please.
Okay, file number 222548, roll number 100064477700, roll year 2023, assessed value 33,572,000, classification 20, and liability taxable. So this has 2 buildings, 7 stories, year built 2015. It's got 153 suites. It's got indoor parking at 129 and 93 outdoor parking. Page 2 shows you the location, located just north of Sterling Lion Parkway and east off of Keniston Boulevard. If we go to page 4, you'll see the model workup here. So we have a gross potential rent on this property of $3,012,839. And we have applied a 15% vacancy on this property due to the vacancy issues that have been apparent over the years. So we feel from that end that we're pretty being pretty reasonable in that regard, applying 15%. And the effective gross income $2,560,913, expense ratio 37.73%, with a net operating income of $1,594,681, and using the capitalization rate of 4.75%. So I have provided here just some rental comparables of other properties that would reflect similar to the subject. So you could see where the average monthly rent per unit would fall. And then page 6 and 7, we touched on already. Page 8 and 9 have been spoken for. Page 11. So I did the income and expense workup here using the 15% vacancy, applying it, and then the adjusted management was also 5% because so if we're using the 15% vacancy and not the actual vacancy, the management was going to be a little bit higher. So we ended up working out to a model of 1,594,681, which was the model. And then I had stabilized at 1,575,043 using the 15%. So we feel like it's within a percent or so of my stabilization. If you want to keep scrolling, I have provided here the income statements. So it just gives you a picture. I guess the main question of this would be the vacancies. So you could see the year-to-date actual for 2020 being 998,748. And then if you scroll to 2019, which was on page 15, you could see the vacancy was higher in 2019 at 1,777,070. So you could see the property has trended, where vacancy has crept downward, which was where we feel we're pretty reasonable at the 15% vacancy. So outside of that, that would conclude my presentation for today.
Thank you. Mr. Navarro, any questions?
Yes. So if we flip to page 4.
Yeah.
Actually, you know what? I'm going to have a look at your page 11 first.
Okay.
Now, you've adjusted the vacancy to market, correct? But you will acknowledge that there is above average vacancy for this location.
Yeah, so our vacancy we used in the model, we actually gave it 15%.
Right. Now, was that an adjustment by yourself, or was that an adjustment by the model?
That was something that we did as a review on the income and expenses, in recognizing that this place is leasing up very slowly. It's had overrides in the past, ticking down those overrides, but it's still, for this cycle, definitely something that's warranted.
Okay. And do you have any idea why the lease up has taken so long?
We do not.
And just of note, in terms of your capitalization rate, you have a 4.75% capitalization rate on it. Now, given the vacancy and its effect on income, would that not be an additional risk? Because we don't know what is affecting the vacancy for this location, correct?
Well, we don't know what's affecting the vacancy. We can see the vacancy rate, the actual vacancy rate is ticking down. It's more apparent in your brief. In terms of adding premium to the capitalization rate, definitely not. There's no way a vendor would recognize and agree upon a sale price based on an elevated vacancy rate. While it is abnormal that it is going down, this property, the estimated market value is around $33 million. They're not gonna make a deduction. This is a long-term investment. Anyone buying this isn't going to assume that, seeing as how, even though it's taking longer to lease up, that they aren't going to eventually hit market on it. So us recognizing the current risk in place in the vacancy rate recognizes that in place diminishing risk. Now to add something at a premium to the cap rate would be double counting. So that would be a fair comment if we had modeled vacancy on it, which I don't think is the appropriate way to reflect the vacancy. And if if we had model vacancy, perhaps a higher cap, definitely, no argument there. But if we're recognizing it in the vacancy, then it's taken care of there.
On that point, and you are correct that the vacancy has been streaming downwards. However, it is 37.5, I believe. I haven't checked exactly. Is that not still a pretty high vacancy for, you know, a property that's, I guess, was built in 2015?
For the vacancy, yes. The vacancy rate, it is abnormal. Usually, like when we don't account for lease up periods, but this, unless the lease up period is an outlier in terms of it being abnormally slow. And there's not a lot of properties in the city where it's an issue. It's not a lot of properties in this area, as you can see with the Bridge Lake properties, but for whatever reason, we're not exactly sure this property is having a much slower lease up. So we don't want to ignore that, and it doesn't exist or doesn't have an effect on value. So that's why we have the vacancy override.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mahone, any questions?
Just one, I guess, for clarification, the pictures. Start again. There's two buildings here. Are they two separate buildings or are they connected? Or do you know?
Well, it's like, it's kind of like they're connected. So it's almost like one building, like it's kind of like a T shape, I guess.
Okay, thank you. I see what that was referencing now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. McIntyre, any questions?
I have no questions, thank you.
And I have no questions either. So Mr. Navarro, please proceed with your presentation.
Okay, thank you. Again, this is 90 Paget Street. This is in Woods, I guess, what we would call it. If you go to page 4 of my report, you can see the properties as they're laid out with the property outlines. So Paget feeds into Linden Woods. You can see Sterling Line there. On the other side of this would be, there is a medical clinic on Sterling Line, and there would be some industrial properties surrounding it. Next to this property, if you can actually look at the very right-hand corner of the picture on page 4, you'll see that there is a railway spur line next to this property. Now there is a right-of-way, I guess you would call it, in between the spur line and that. And then you see our property there. On page 5, you see an overhead or a bird's eye view of this property. And on page 6, it's the highest and best use is the current use. I believe we can probably go to the capitalization rate on page 9. Obviously, we're acknowledging that there is some additional risk to this property. In terms of the vacancy, we have adjusted the vacancy to account for additional vacancy. Obviously, we're not anywhere near where the actual vacancy is. But I would challenge Mr. Matt's opinion on this one. I have a hard time pronouncing your last name sometimes. So I would challenge your position on that one. And I would say that without having a firm understanding of what's causing the vacancy, you can't dismiss that there would not be some additional risk here. I don't know if it's locational based or what, we simply don't know, but obviously a building that was built in 2015, we are now in 2023. We're looking at the economic date of April 1, 2021. that's almost a 6-year period there. And as to why the vacancy would be that high at this point, there has to be some explanation to this. And I think it could be locational. I'm speculating at this point, but I don't see how you couldn't acknowledge somewhat in the capitalization. So you have our chart, you know that we would typically put a 5.25% cap rate on this. And we have added an additional 25 point adjustment to this to 5.5. And that is to acknowledge the issues with this property. And obviously, going forward, if there continues to be vacancy issues, then at some point we're going to have to take a harder look at this property. But from our understanding, we would have to put some type of premium on that. A vacancy like that for a property, again, that is at the reference date, almost 6 years old, shouldn't have a lease-up period that long. And if there is a lease-up period, obviously you would not acknowledge it in the vacancy, but I think this goes beyond what a typical lease-up period would be. So we are acknowledging some additional risk to this property. So in terms of the net operating income, as you can see there, we've stabilized 3 years. We have a net operating income of $1,585,376. I believe the assessor also went through the exercise of stabilizing, and they stabilized it at $1,575,000. So we are slightly higher than they are when we stabilize. And that might have been because we looked at 3 years rather than 2. So that is it. That is the crux of the argument as to whether there should be some additional premium put on the property in terms of the capitalization rate. And I'm open for.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mikulik, any questions?
So just to be clear, so you don't feel the 15% vacancy fully accounts for the slower lease-up period typical for this property?
I think the vacancy supports the vacancy that we put in there is an acknowledgement of some vacancy. It's obviously not the actual vacancy, but we know the city's position on vacancy. You will not look at anything above 20% really, unless you deem it to be chronically vacant. I don't know when that starts. I mean, even at 37.5%, and we're looking at 2020, is it chronically vacant? I don't know. It seems like it. So we've only acknowledged 15%, just like you have. But from our perspective, we're just acknowledging that there is additional risk to this property because it's having lease-up issues and something is causing it. So this is not typical of any property. I think most properties that you've seen do not take this long to lease up, correct?
That's correct. So just looking at it, at the price tag of $33 million, you'd agree that the players involved, they'd be looking at this as more than likely a long-term investment?
I would say that any property that is this high in value would be looked at as a long-term investment.
Okay, good.
We're looking at a 10-year horizon, probably, if you're looking at and analyzing this property properly, you're probably going to look at it over a 10-year period.
Okay, so the vacancy dropped about what is that, 25% between 2019 and 2020, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so building in a 15% vacancy and acknowledging that it's a long-term investment, would an investor not assume that it would more than likely reach market vacancy in the next few years?
I don't know that they would have that evidence to suggest so. So they may adjust the vacancy and they may adjust the cap rate to acknowledge it. There's two different perspectives on that. You could go with your own and say that they're acknowledging it solely in the capitalization rate. But again, given this property's performance, I don't see how you could not acknowledge any additional, how you could not acknowledge additional risk to this property. I see it. I'm not sure why the city doesn't.
Do you think it would be 15% vacant on the long term? I think that's what they would agree on, hypothetical vendor and purchaser.
Well, so let's look at the track record of this property. At 37.5% vacancy in 2020, that's 5 years from the build date. So again, I don't know where that's going. And that, as an investor, I would be asking myself is, where is the vacancy? Where is the issue with this property?
Do you know what the current vacancy on this property is?
I don't know, but we're not looking at that right now.
Okay, fair enough. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Mr. McIntyre, do you have any questions?
I have no questions, thank you.
Mr. Mahone, any questions?
One question, again, with respect to the pictures on your page 4 and 5. Looking at page 5, first of all, that is an aerial shot of 90 Paget. At the forefront of the picture, there appears to be a covered and closed walkway leading to the right of the picture, which appears as well at page 4 at the bottom of the picture. Is that connected indoors to 100 Paget next door? And if so, do they share amenities?
I'm not sure if that actually is enclosed. I can't give you an answer. To me, I mean, from here, it almost looks just like I can't even comment because really there's no, the picture's not good enough.
Fair enough. Thank you. I was just curious about that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any need for summation on either side on this property?
No summation.
Thank you. Mr. Navarro?
Oh,
No. Okay, thank you very much. That concludes 90 Paget Street. So we'll move on to the next item on the docket, which is 100 Paget Street. So Mr. Mikulik, when you're ready.
Okay, this is file number 22-2554, roll number 1000644760. Roll year 2023, assessed value 39,307,000, classification 20, liability taxable. One building, 6 stories, built in 2011, 130 suites with 78 indoor parking, 83 outdoor parking, and it is located next door to the previous property that we had discussed, 90 Paget. Scrolling on down to page 3. So again, we had 130 suites. Average monthly rent per unit on this one is higher at $2,019.71. Gross potential rent is $3,150,748. Our vacancy there, 4.2%, gets you an effective gross income of $3,018,417. Expenses 36.19%. Net operating income of $1,926,052, and the capitalization rate of 4.90%. Again, I had posted rental comparables. It was very difficult to get rental comps for this property that would be up near the average monthly rent per unit that we do have on here. So but I think we have reflected that in our total income with our gross potential rent and our net operating income, as you see, being pretty close to what this property is. we had talked about capitalization rate of on page 5 and 6, 7 and 8. That's been discussed. You could see here the workup that I did provide for the past 3 years. So you could see the subject effective gross income in 2018, 2019, and 2020. What I stabilized that, and then you could see what I had done for my stabilization of expenses. So at the end of it, we stabilized at 1,916,939, and our models within 10,000 of that at 1,926,052. So again, like I was pointing to the rents, it works out that our net operating income still comes in within 0.5% or less than that of this property. Now, I had just provided here for reference just a picture that I could find online of the property. You could see, I know, I mean, right now it says no vacancy, but that wouldn't apply to this conversation that we're going through right now. And then just some of the amenities and building and suite features that it has. So you could see here 11 different suite layouts, on-site management, fireside community room for residents to enjoy, furnished guest suite, fitness room, heated indoor-outdoor parking, high ceilings and quality luxury finishes for the building. So page 12 and 13, 14 and onwards just provides again their income and expenses just for reference that would have been used in the workup for the property. So outside of that, that would conclude the presentation.
Thank you. Mr. Navarro, any questions?
Yes. Now, you stated that you had no real, really good comparisons in terms of rent comparables.
No, that's, and I mean, you could see on page 5, it's definitely outside the scope, but we had made weight on the actuals, so we didn't feel there was reason for an adjustment there.
Okay, but it's predicting a rent of 2,019.71 per suite.
Yeah.
And that is actually quite a bit higher than the actual, is it not?
Yeah, it is. Although I would say that our net operating income, when we stabilize, works out within 10,000 of the subjects. So at the end of the day, when we're basing that on the bottom line, we feel comfortable there.
Okay, so basically what the model has done is it's calculated a high rent, but it's calculated a high expense ratio.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, in terms of the capitalization rate, again, it's causing some cloudiness in my head because we're at 4.9 here, and I realize that this is a 2011 building, so it's slightly older than the ones that we've looked at, and that could be accounting for some of it. But at the same time, it's a superior type of construction. We're looking at masonry bearing walls, so this is a heavier type of building, much more solid. Wouldn't you think that it would have, lower risk profile, yet your model is saying 4.90?
I think that's a fair comment. Again, I didn't assign the capitalization rate for this property, but I can see where your train of thought is going. I believe this is the most expensive market value. I think it's more than Bridge Lake. Perhaps that limits the pool, but I wouldn't at that amount of money. I don't think maybe that would be the case. I would tend to agree with you.
Okay.
Any further questions, Mr. Navarro?
No, I have no further questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Mahone, any questions for the assessors?
No questions, thank you.
Mr. McIntyre?
Just one or possibly two questions. So both 90 Paget and 100 Paget are owned by Crystal Properties, according to the income statements.
Well, this says the owner's Grand Lion Terrace. Maybe Crystal Properties is Crystal Properties could be the management company that does the income statements.
Were they built by Crystal Builders?
90 Paget is owned by Castle Gardens Ltd. So I don't know if they were built by the same.
We don't have the permits in the briefs to verify that information.
Okay, that was my only question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I have no questions, so Mr. Navarro, please proceed with your presentation.
Okay, so we are looking at 100 Paget. You can see a picture of it on page 2. And the overhead pictures on page 4 and 5. So this is on the corner of Sterling Line and Paget Street. The highest and best use on page 6 is the continued use. And if we look to the capitalization rate, again, we've gone with 5.25. On page 11, you can see our workup. We are slightly above the assessor in terms of the net operating income, and we've applied a 5.25% cap rate on this, giving us a value of $36,741,006. That is really the only difference. In terms of the rest of the information in the appendix, this brief is kind of thick. The reason for it is that I've included the income and expenses for the years that I've looked at. And I'm open for questions.
Thank you. Mr. Mikulik, any questions?
No questions.
Mr. Mahone, any questions?
No, I don't have any questions, thank you.
Mr. McIntyre?
I have no questions. Thank you.
I just have one question in relation to vacancy here, because it seems to not be a huge issue, but Mr. Navarro, previously on the previous property, you were speculating perhaps location. So any idea what the difference would be here?
And you're not next to a set of railroad tracks.
Okay, the other one is
Whereas the other
adjacent.
property is. And that's speculation on my part. There's no.
Yeah. Are the
There's
fit
no,
and finishes in these
you
two
know,
buildings quite different? So, I'm sorry, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
I've only done exterior inspections, and quick ones, not thorough ones. So, but I believe that the fit finish is probably similar.
They're similar. Okay, thank you. Okay, that's all I had. Thank you. So that completes this property. So the final property on our docket this morning is 895 Wilkes Avenue. And Mr. Mikulik, when you're ready, please.
Can we just do like just 2 minutes quickly and be back at 11:30?
Sure, 2 minutes. Yep. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll call the meeting back to order, and we will now move on to the last item on our docket this morning, which is 895 Wilkes Avenue. And Mr. Mikulik, please proceed when you're ready.
Okay, we have file number 22841, roll number 12051626200. The roll year 2023, so there's multiple assessed values here. There's 298,000 for the institutional 40 that's taxable. There's 19,570,000 for the 40 institutional that's school tax exempt, and there's 5,861,000 for 20 residential T. So this has 5 buildings on it. You could see the number of stories 1 to 10. Actual year built, effective year built between 1989 to 1998. 144 total suites, 93 indoor parking, 91 outdoor parking. The location here is on the northwest corner of like Wilkes and Waverly Street. You could see it's by the, I believe that's Springs Christian might be around there. Or no, I can't remember what school it was, but it's on the northwest corner of Waverly and Wilkes. Scrolling down, oh, Linden Christian School, that's the one I'm thinking of. Scrolling down the income value summary, the average monthly rent per unit we have is $1481.08. Now you could see here the various income streams. So the reason why there is a 40T and a 40S is due to the property being over, the 40S being over the land exemption. So there is a bit of residual there that's in 40T, but you could see in the adjustments column, we have reflected that that is adjusted downward on the 40S and taken out of that value to get to the 19,570,000. And then the apartment portion 20T is seniors, is a life lease. And you could see here what we have done with the gross potential rent, the expense ratios being 42.99% and 44.78% on the 40S. So the net operating income totaling would be similar to what the applicant is using here. So, you know, all things being equal, we feel like it's going to come down to a cap rate discussion for this property as well. But carrying on page 5 with the rent comps, you could see I've just provided a snapshot of, again, similar properties, the average monthly rent per unit, where it would fall in line there. Again, the cap rate stuff we don't have to discuss. I did just show on page 11, there was sales that took place in some of these life lease units. And so I've provided that information there just for, so you could see what they're selling for, pictures of the property and the surrounding area and the units that were sold on MLS. I was able to put in there. So outside of that, I think that would conclude the presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Navarro, any questions?
Yes. In a life lease, who is responsible for making repairs to individual units?
I believe it's the tenants.
Okay. Now, looking at your page 11, where you have your sales listed there, there's a pretty extreme fluctuation there, would you say?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Now, as we just pointed out, the individual occupant or life leasee is responsible for maintenance of their units. Could that possibly account for the fluctuations in prices here?
Potentially, yeah. I mean, make a case for it for sure.
Okay. And as per Manitoba's legislation on life leases, the only reason we're looking at this as an apartment is because Manitoba's legislation states that life leases must be considered as rental units, correct?
I mean, that's how we value them. I haven't read the literature in a while, so I'll take your word for it.
Now, the occupant, we'll call them the renter, is responsible for some portion or all as per their share of the operational expenses, correct?
I believe so, but we're valuing them as just an apartment, plain old apartment. What someone purchasing it for the purpose of making money would look at this operation as if it was an apartment, not a life lease.
Okay. So effectively, what we're looking at is really just a, we're ignoring the life lease. We're looking at it from a fee simple perspective, right? So we're applying market parameters and we are coming up effectively with a hypothetical value for this property, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have exactly the same net operating income. So
Yeah,
I mean, that's where we're at for this one.
okay. And you've deviated from, and I'll, again, we can say that this property is, built, I guess, between 89 and 98. I don't know. I don't know the reasoning for that. Can you explain the varied age?
We're just checking it. I would assume that given that there's a number of buildings on the property, that's the range in which 5 buildings were built in.
Okay. So the cap rate in this case is reflecting the age, possibly, and is it, I mean, you said that you're looking at it from the perspective of an apartment building. So why have you adjusted the cap rate in this case?
I'm not sure what you mean by adjusting the cap rate. The cap rate we have is 5.3.
Okay.
The whole operation.
I'll try and explain myself a little bit better. So for the previous properties, we were hovering in that 4.7, 4.75 range, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
You would admit that this is a deviation from that, would you not?
Well, I mean, it's also not built in the past couple of years. It's got buildings from that are over 30 years old.
Okay, so then what you're saying by that is that this is age related?
Well, I'm saying that's one very noticeable difference. I mean, if 2 buildings are the same, I mean, you have cap rate categories in your study too, right? So, I mean, given everything else the same, if 2 buildings are right next to each other and one is 30 years older than the other, the investor and vendor would come up with a different cap rate on the hypothetical purchase.
Okay. Not that it matters, and I'll get into it in my report, but for 1980 to 1998, we still have 5.25 as our cap rate. So it's not really, from our perspective, it's not really making a difference. However, in your analysis, I'm trying to get at what is causing this. So if it's a combination of age and something else, what is the something else?
Well, I'm just saying the most noticeable difference is age on this property. Not for nothing, you didn't use 5.25, use 5.5, but we'll touch on that.
Sorry. Yes. That is our base rate, 5.25, correct?
Well, I mean, that's your stuff.
Yeah.
So, well, I mean, age is a big one on properties. There's age, there's size. I mean, this one is big too. So I would say, just looking at the property record card here with the details and the inventory we have in our system, that age is the most noticeable difference.
Okay. Getting on the topic of age, is there any way of distinguishing what parts of this complex are, say, 1989 vintage versus 1998?
In the evidence here, no. It's also, I think what's different with this one, it's also 10 stories. The other ones weren't high rises.
Okay. But I mean, there's a combination of different types of buildings for this property, correct?
Yep.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McIntyre, any questions?
I have no questions, thank you.
Mr. Mahone, any questions?
No, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
And I do not either. So Mr. Navarro, please proceed with your presentation.
Okay, as you can see on the first page, this is 8895 Wilkes. If you turn to page 5, you can see an overhead picture of where this is located. And I believe the property next door on the right side is the church. And on the left side is the, I was going to say Kubota, but I don't think that's it. Yeah, I'm not sure what that is actually next door to it. On page 6, you can see the overhead picture. And as the assessor noted, that there is a high rise here, and then there is a low rise building. And you can see the low rise building on the top, which is, I believe, a 1, 2, 3. It looks like 3-story versus a high rise. In terms of the application of approaches, you can see on page 12 that we have effectively the same income. So, as Matt pointed out, we are looking at this from a fee simple perspective. So we are looking at market rents. If you look at the actuals, this building is much lower in terms of its actual reported income rather than looking at the market. And we have effectively taken what the city has done here. So we've come up with a $1,363,646 net operating income. That is because we've elected to use the city's parameters for this. And as noted again, taking the actuals would have been wrong because they are, as in social housing, they would be much lower. So in terms of the capitalization rate, that is the only difference that we have adjusted the rate. So our for this age of property, our base rate would have been 5.25 as well. And I'm not sure about the age that the assessor has put on this and how that relates to the property as a whole. Is it more towards the 1990s or is it more towards the 1980s? I don't know. I really don't know. You could maybe pick somewhere in the middle and say 1995. We chose a 5.25 cap rate. And the reason that we've added an additional 25-point premium is because of the type of property it is. And, you are looking at a property that, as I explained in the questions to the assessor, the owners themselves are responsible for the upkeep of these units. So they're reflected in the sale prices that the assessor looked at. So it is speculation, but what we think is that some of these properties sell less simply because they are not as well maintained. They haven't been refurbished as much as some others, and some of them command higher prices in the open market. So that in itself, I think, in terms of how you would be looking at it from a financial perspective and risk, you have less control over a property like this, and you're not going to be able to manage it in the same way that you would a proper apartment property. So that's why we are reflecting some additional risk to this property. And I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Assessors. Do you have any questions for Mr. Navarro?
Yeah. Okay. So there's basically for the life lease portion, what they're buying in on MLS is basically an entrance fee. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm not sure what it's called, but
yeah. Okay, and so that entrance fee, to my understanding of life leases, it sits with the property, and that allows them to use those entrance fees to cover capital repairs like roof and HVAC and other big items. Would that be a fair statement?
I would say that the individual renters are responsible for operational expenses as well. So I'm not sure exactly, to what extent those funds would be kept. I'm not as familiar with like leases, but I would think that some of that money would be kept in maybe a holding account. I'm not exactly sure, but what I do know is that the renters themselves are responsible for operational costs. So that's where I say, and they're also responsible for their own individual units. So you can have, a variation of conditions from unit to unit. And again, that is not typical of an apartment building. And I don't know if you would acknowledge, but you can't manage a building like this in the same way as you can as a regular apartment building. And that's where we've said there would be some additional risk to this property.
Okay. But also then we're valuing it as a fee simple, so perhaps that doesn't apply. But they do have an account just to make sure that, so when they sell their life lease, they get that entrance fee back, correct?
Yeah, I don't think they get it back with interest, though. I think they just, I could be mistaken, but I think the way it works is that you get that original, whatever you call it, a deposit. It's a very large deposit, but I think you get that back, but not with interest.
So the owner would be collecting the interest on the property while they have the entrance fee.
Yeah.
Okay, so so you bump the cap 0.25%, and just looking, sorry, I'm in the wrong brief here. On your page 10, the factor, so 1987, the property is 35 years old. That falls right within what's pretty much the middle of 1980, 1998 at 5.25. Would you agree that the overall age of the property is not a justification to bump the cap rate?
Not alone.
Okay. I'm just making sure that those categories mean.
Yeah, I mean, like to go back to some of my line of questioning. The question of what was causing the bump up in the cap rates in the model was partly age related and partly I don't know. In this case, bumping up the cap rate is, I think, a factor, or is due to the life lease property itself, and there being some inherent risk in the way that these types of properties are managed. And again, you can see it in kind of reflected in the sales values of these suites.
So I think I get what you're saying is so some of the units would be 1987 original, and some would be the owners, I would understand, would have maybe fixed them up, renovated, changed cabinets, flooring, whatnot. So 87 would be the base, and then there could be some renovated units as well. Would that be a fair statement?
Yeah, so in the normal cycle of an apartment building, you would see a more routine maintenance schedule, right? You would see, where a typical apartment building, you may be looking at, $1,000 to $1,500 in maintenance annually per suite. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, that's usually what we're in, yeah.
Yeah, so in this type of scenario, you're probably not going to see that. You're going to see some units, as you noted, have been probably heavily refreshed. And then there are some that are probably, vintage 1987, because the owners probably haven't done very much to them. And again, that's where I'm saying you wouldn't see that in a typically managed apartment.
Yeah, it's typically they're either all renovated or they're all basic. But here it seems that we're agreeing that some of them are renovated, but we don't have an effective age on the property.
Yeah.
That would be something that's really difficult to quantify. I think we'd agree.
I would,
Yeah, okay. Well, I think that's about it for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mahone, any questions?
just one with respect to your appendix A or page 12, your income statement. Where would the interest, that one that the management company is receiving from the investment of the deposits, as you put it, where would that be reflected?
It's not in the income expenses. So when I said that, I believe what they do is actually put it into kind of like a, I don't know what the term is, under the blanket or under the mattress. And it gets put into some type of investment vehicle where they gain interest on it. And at some point when, you know, the person moves out, what they're paid back is the original entrance fee.
Right, but the capital gains or the interest that's drawn in
Would
10 years or.
Yeah, would likely go to them. It's not noted in this. And, you know, that's where we actually deviated from that altogether. And if you can see in our workup, it matches what the city is doing, right?
Mhm.
That's because it is what the city is doing. We took their market approach and adjusted the capitalization rate, saying that this is not a typical property. There would be some additional risk to this property. And that's the difference between the two of us.
Okay. That was going to be my next question. So thank you.
Yeah.
That's the only question I had.
Thank you very much. Mr. McIntyre, do you have any questions?
I have no questions, thank you.
And I don't believe I have any questions either. So that being said, we've heard all the items on the docket this morning. So this hearing is now adjourned. And thank you very much, everyone, for your participation.
Let's take care.
Thanks.
Thank you.